He's got it. Here he comes. Way back to baby to Cleveland slam dunk. And the doctor made a sensational play. Ireland front the foot. Did they score? And Giroux's got it. West Dennis fires. Blast and goal! Brady back again. He's got to be 10 and full forward. And he fumbled the football and the Eagles have it.
We welcome you to the Philly Sports Hour here on a warm Sunday morning. Welcome to the show, everybody. Got a lot to talk about today. Eagles, draft, Sixers, Game 4 preview, and some other stuff to go over. Before we get to any of that, want to push it again. Philly Sports game at Citizens Bank Park, Saturday, June 1st, 7:15. Phils take on the Cardinals. Pre-game meetup, rally towels, and season section. 301 and 310 with the Fandemic Crew. $50 a ticket. Venmo at JenniferG71 to go. So coming up very soon. It's almost May. So jump on that before it is too late. More information is on our social medias. Let's get right into it because we got a big show today. So let's bring in Mr. Sam Hines. Sam, how are we?
Doing good. It was a very busy and eventful week in Philly sports, and it wraps up today with some Sixers playoff basketball, and we got a lot to talk about. But it was a pretty good week.
Yeah, we were having audio trouble before. I couldn't hear my AirPods. Now they're working, so I don't know what was up with that. But yeah, a lot to talk about. Busy weekend from Thursday, the draft, Game 3 to now. But we're gonna start with the draft, where it was really good draft by the Eagles. Let's just start at pick number 1 for the Birds. Pick 22, they went Quinyon Mitchell, corner out of Toledo, top-ranked corner in the draft, and he kind of fell right into the Eagles' lap. Is it the right first-round pick over the Bama boys?
Yeah, so like you said, a lot of the draft experts out there had Quinyon as ranked as the number 1 corner in the draft, and for the Eagles to just kind of sit there at 22 and have him fall to them was kind of a best-case scenario for them, as obviously he was their number 1 ranked corner in the draft as well because they had their pick of the litter and they chose Mitchell. Personally, for me, I liked Terrion Arnold a little bit better than Mitchell. I would have went with him over Quinyon just because of the reason of him playing at Alabama versus Toledo. I do think even though Toledo did play Ohio State a few times, him playing in the MAC does have me nervous. But when you look deeper into the guy and the player that Quinyon is, it does make a lot of sense on why the Eagles decided on him. Ran a 4.3 in the 40 last year. He didn't allow a single penalty. He also didn't allow a single touchdown last year. That's kind of stuff that you heard about when Sauce Gardner was coming out and people were saying that he played at Cincinnati, blah, blah, blah. Well, you look at his and he dominated, his opponents that he played against, and Quinyon did the exact same. And then he also had an opportunity to leave Toledo to go to a bigger school, possibly Alabama, Oklahoma, some of those schools, and he decided to stay loyal because they were loyal to him, as he likes to say. So I do think that it is a good pick for the Eagles. I think getting a cornerback in round 1 was the best case scenario. I did not want them to go offensive line like a lot of people did in the first round. And, I really hope that this small school doesn't come back to bite us, as it has, unfortunately, in the past, of taking some smaller school guys while some bigger school guys are still on the board at the same position. I don't want to bring up any bad memories and name any names, but I think we all know who I'm talking about. But I do like the pick, and I think that one of the things, though, for this pick is I do think he has to start week 1. I do think he needs to start over James Bradberry because after this year, whether or not Bradberry is going to make it to week 1, Slay is most likely gone after this year. So I would like to see him on the outside starting week 1, getting a lot of reps against, some of the NFL caliber wide receivers. A lot of the reason that the Eagles did pick him is because of the Senior Bowl. The Eagles historically have put a lot of stock into the Senior Bowl and how different players kind of play at the Senior Bowl. And against the top wide receivers in the Senior Bowl, Mitchell walked away as, okay, this guy's the top guy. He can cover those top wide receivers. So that's definitely encouraging. But I would love to see him get more of those reps as that kind of number 2 guy in the NFL his first year before taking over at CB1.
You mentioned James Bradbury. There's a thing out there that it could be cut by June 1st, which wouldn't really cost the Eagles anything, would open a lot of cap room as well. Is that the right move to cut Bradbury, or would you hold on to him?
So I think that if the Eagles really do believe that Quinion can come in and start from day one, then you have to cut Bradbury. Like you said, if they designate him as a post-June 1 cut, they save a ton of money. And then that way, from day one in training camp, Mitchell can be lined up with the ones and get all the reps. I mean, we know how important it's going to be for him to get reps against Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown, even in training camp, just to get him used to playing these elite wide receivers. So I would cut Bradbury if they do project him to be the day one starter. Obviously, like I said, I want him to be the day one starter, but I think that they should designate Bradbury as a post-June 1 cut. And then something that some guys have been throwing out is that the Eagles might even look to move off Slay now. Personally, I wouldn't do that. I would wait. I would keep Mitchell as the cornerback 2 this year and then move on from Slay last year. But I think a lot of people are scared of how quickly Bradbury just kind of fell off last year, and we're all just kind of waiting for that with Slay. I don't think he's going to have as drastic of a fall off as Bradbury because he is a little bit faster than Bradbury. The biggest thing Bradbury kind of fell off with last year was just not being able to keep up with receivers. So I would definitely cut Bradbury.
Quinion. It's a good football name, Quinion Mitchell. So is that we're going to grade each pick and then give you the whole grade. So what would you grade Quinion Mitchell at 22 for the Eagles?
So I would grade it as an A. I wouldn't go an A+ just because I do, like I said, I like Terrion Arnold better. But to be completely honest, I thought both Quinion and Terrion Arnold would be gone by this pick. So I didn't look a ton. I looked into them, but not as much as I did guys like Kool-Aid or Cooper DeJean, of guys who were projected to be there available for the Eagles. I do think that them being able to just stick at 22 and not having to use one of their second round picks is massive. So being able to stick there, obviously getting the guy they like, and I do project that he is going to be a good corner in the NFL, I give it an A.
You mentioned Cooper DeJean. Well, he didn't get over in the first round, but they somehow got him in the second. They traded picks 50, 53, and 161 for pick 40, and they got Cooper DeJean, first-team AP All-American, Big Ten Defensive Back of the Year, second-team All Big Ten, was tied for the FBS lead with 3 pick sixes. This dude's all over the place, and how in the world did he drop the 40?
Yeah, he's an electric player, like you said, with all those pick sixes and all those accolades he racked up. I mean, he is just a top-tier athlete. And how he fell, I think the reason that he fell, well, I mean, I always love when people say fall because none of these guys ever fall. It's just the mock drafters just had the wrong read on these guys. But I always find myself saying fall as well. It's just funny. But I think the reason that he was a second-round pick is because he's not, he wasn't great at one thing. He was really, really good at a lot of things. And I think that sometimes that can scare teams off a little bit. You see a guy like Jabril Peppers a few years ago coming out of Michigan, where he was kind of the same thing as Cooper DeJean, where he took offensive snaps. He was their punt returner. He could play safety. He could play cornerback. He's just all over the field. And we haven't really seen him work out because he wasn't exactly great at one area. And in the NFL, it's really hard to just kind of move guys around like that. I do think that it's a great pick for the Eagles for sure. But I think the reason that he fell is just because teams are going to have a hard time kind of incorporating him into their defense.
However, though, he is electric. And how are the Eagles going to use him?
Yeah, so I think that the biggest thing for them is that they've had players like this before. So maybe not, Vic Fangio, but the Eagles staff as a whole has had these kind of players before. So they should be better equipped to incorporate him than some other teams. I think he compares a lot to Malcolm Jenkins. If you look at Malcolm Jenkins coming out of college, he was a great cornerback. He was a corner with the Saints, and then the Eagles moved him over to safety. He kind of played up in the box a little bit, played close to the line of scrimmage, just like that hybrid safety slot corner kind of mix. So I do kind of project the Eagles to do that. It will be really interesting to see if they have him start over Avonte Maddox in the slot, or if they decide to put him as a safety, maybe over Reed Blankenship. I think it's weird because the Eagles are going to have two of these guys now, because C.J. Gardner-Johnson is a lot like that too, where he's going to be kind of used all over the field. So I don't know if they're going to really want to use two like hybrid safety kind of guys in the backfield right away. But I do think that if he comes out and really shows that he can be an elite lockdown cornerback, then going back to what I said earlier, I don't think that they'll move on from Slay just yet. But if Cooper DeJean comes into camp and he shows that, hey, I'm not a hybrid guy, I'm this lockdown corner that, I like to tell everybody that I am, and a lot of people think that I can be, then, maybe the Eagles just decide to go young on the outsides and let the young guys run. But I think one of the great things about getting him in the second round too is that it kind of takes the pressure off him to start from day one. Whereas if he was, taken in the Quinion Mitchell slot of 22, obviously he would have to be, or we would want him to be, that starting outside corner, where at pick 40, it gives the Eagles a little bit more time to figure out just exactly how they want to utilize his skill set. But no matter what, they're going to find ways to get him on the field. Like you said, he's such an electric player. And I think by the end of the season, mid-weeks of the season, he'll find his way into the starting lineup. But at just what role, it's going to be really, really hard to tell until this whole kind of thing shakes out with who's exactly going to be on the roster in the secondary. Because even if they project him as, an inside guy in the slot kind of area, they have Isaiah Rodgers there too. So where is he going to play? And they got a lot of guys in the secondary now, which is very exciting, because a lot of young guys too. Coming off the last season, it did not look very young and exciting back there.
Yeah, so it's a whole different look in the secondary. You mentioned Isaiah Rodgers, and I actually do want to ask you, he's off. He was gambling, and he maybe he was listening to our Gamblers R Us podcast, which you can go listen to, or he was listening to our Eagles pregame shows. He was taking your advice, some of your locks of the day. But he's back with the Eagles. A lot of people didn't even know he was an Eagle, but pleasant surprise. He's really good. Kind of run him down a little bit, and how big could he be for the secondary?
Yeah, so like you said, he was suspended 1 year for gambling. He was gambling on the Colts. I don't know this information for sure, but I would have to assume, based on the Jontay Porter situation with the Raptors, where Jontay Porter was betting on the Raptors to lose games, I would have to assume that he was betting on the Colts to win, for him not to be completely banned from the NFL. But yeah, he was betting on the Colts. He was betting at team facilities, so he was suspended for 1 year. But like you said, when he played, he was a very good cornerback for the Colts. PFF, take it for what you will. I know a lot of people don't love PFF, but they had him ranked as their 5th or 6th cornerback in 2022 as an outside guy. A lot of people around Philadelphia think that he's going to come in and play on the inside. Maybe if Cooper DeJean is going to be more of a Malcolm Jenkins safety hybrid type, then they might project 2025 outside cornerbacks to be Quinion Mitchell, Isaiah Rodgers, and then whoever they want to put in the slot. If that is Cooper DeJean as the hybrid guy, I think that is definitely a possibility. Or even this year, if Isaiah Rodgers proves that he can play inside, and the Eagles, they brought back Avonte Maddox, obviously, but on a very non-lucrative contract. Isaiah Rodgers, if he can move into the inside, he could be one of the starters this year. I think it was a good move by Howie, taking a risk on him by trading him. He is very talented, and he is very young. He hasn't played football in a year, so it's going to take a little bit of time, especially if he has to adjust to a new position of playing inside. But when he did play outside, he was a very good corner for the Colts. And like I said earlier, all of a sudden this Eagles secondary starting in the 2025 season could be completely flipped on its head.
It could be, and it's looking that way. Back to DeJean, what grade would you give it?
So I would also give it an A. I don't want to just throw out A's here, but I think I would not have picked Cooper DeJean at pick 22, but getting him in the second round, I know they had to trade pick 50 and 53 to get him, but it was, they were able to get a third round pick out of that as well. So it didn't really matter too much. I think that the Eagles being aggressive and going up and getting a guy that they liked, they talked about how they considered him at pick 22. I really like the player. I really hope that they are able to utilize his skill set to the best of his ability. And if they are, one of the things I didn't talk about, but I want to highlight here, was why I like the pick so much, is he is a hard hitter. He's a playmaker with the ball in his hands. If he makes interceptions, he can play special teams, kick returner, punt returner, all that kind of stuff. But when he hits people, he makes them feel it, and that is the one thing that the Eagles secondary really lacked last year. Coming in, he will at least be able to do that from week one, so that's a big add into the secondary. And I like the pick a lot.
Yeah, it's a good pick for him to fall. The final pick of day 3 for the Eagles was Jalix Hunt, which is an interesting name. I don't really hear a lot of Jalixes. You ever met a Jalix?
No, I've not.
He's an outside line from Houston Christian. So another smaller school. What do you see out of Hunt? I didn't really hear of him until they picked him, and then I did a little bit of research. But what do you see?
Yeah, I had never heard of him before until the Eagles picked him. I always watched the ESPN draft, but apparently on the NFL Network's one, Daniel Jeremiah had him, as one of his best players available at the time the Eagles picked. I know Howie Roseman joked that he was going to send him a text to say, take him off your best player available board. We don't want anyone to know about this guy. He's 6'4", 247, former safety, turned into a outside linebacker, edge rusher. He has a ton of raw talent, but the key word is raw. He is super raw, and he is a guy that Eagles fans should not expect to really play next year. He is going to take a lot of coaching. He has all the measurables. I mean, 6'4", 247, that is a big dude coming off the edge. He's extremely quick, extremely fast, and one of those guys that makes the quarterback feel him when he is there. Again, he was a standout at the Senior Bowl. The Eagles highly, highly value players that go to the Senior Bowl and put on good shows at the Senior Bowl. So I think that that's where they really fell in love with him. I like the pick, but I don't know if I like it in the third round. Like I said, I've never heard of this guy before, so I never knew, kind of what round he was projected to go in. I would have liked them taking a risk on him a little bit later than with such a premium pick in the third round. But if they can develop him, kind of hone his skills in and get him to use that size and athleticism, he definitely has a lot of potential, but it definitely is going to be a project. Coming from Houston Christian, he was the first player ever drafted out of Houston Christian, which is pretty wild. But the Eagles are definitely taking risks on some of these smaller school guys in the first couple rounds. One of the things we've praised them for the last couple of years is, just sticking with the big schools. They've gotten burned by the small schools for so long. Why don't they just draft in the SEC? Why don't they just draft in the SEC? Once they started doing it, Devontae, Landon Dickerson, Jalen Carter, these guys have really panned out. So them going back to the small schools is definitely risky, but it could backfire, or they could be finding some diamonds in the rough. As far as a grade for this pick, I would have to give it a C, just because, like I said, I feel like they could have waited on this guy. I wouldn't have gotten him. I would have gone other areas with such a high pick, but it was definitely a need that they have to fill. And I do think that he has a lot of upside, but at the same time, he does, have major bust potential as well. Just, super raw coming from a super small school.
Comment on Instagram, kind of throwing something in on Jalix Hunt. Remember, this is from at RedXWolfX619 on Instagram. Remember, Hunt is a Vic Fangio favorite. So thoughts on that? Fangio had a little bit of an in on the pick, and could he work with him a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, that's good. Me personally, like everyone, whenever, it's good that he likes him, because obviously he's going to be playing in his scheme, and the Eagles hope that Fangio is going to be here for a long time. But personally, I mean, the Eagles, everyone has always hated the Eagles defense over the last couple of years, and they hate the Vic Fangio style. So I feel like it's kind of, hypocritical of Eagles fans that as soon as we get that, everyone hates Jonathan Gannon, but he ran the Fangio style. But one thing I will say about the Fangio style with Jonathan Gannon is that they got a lot of production out of the edge rushers. One thing with Miami last year, though, they did not get a lot of production out of their edge rushers. They talked about it a lot during the draft, how a lot of the Miami edge rushers had a down season last year, and that when Miami was up to pick, that some of the guys were talking about how they thought that they should take edge rushers because of the seasons that those guys had last year. Obviously, that was under Fangio. But it's good that he likes him because he's going to be going into his scheme. But just because Fangio, likes him doesn't make me too much more confident that he's going to turn out as a great player, because so many times we see these guys taken, especially by the Eagles in these later rounds, that just don't pan out. But he definitely has all the measurables, so I for sure hope he does.
Pick 127, the Eagles went back to a big school, Clemson running back Will Shipley. What would you grade this one, the Shipman?
Yeah, so I like this pick. It definitely makes me a little bit nervous just because he did break his leg at the end of last season. Kenny Gainwell competition for sure. 3,350 total yards over his last 3 seasons. He's a really good pass blocker, and he's a really good receiver out of the backfield. One of the things that we hope to see with Kellen Moore going forward is using the running backs out of the backfield a little bit more. We didn't really see it as much as we wanted to last couple of years, especially with guys like Gainwell and Swift, who, that was a lot of people thought that was a lot of their strengths was coming out of the backfield as receivers, but they didn't really utilize it too much. I mean, Saquon Barkley, we all know how great of a player and a receiver out of the backfield he is, and this kid is a good receiver as well. And I do like that he's a good pass blocker. One of the biggest reasons that DeAndre Swift didn't even get on the field as much as a lot of Eagles fans wanted last year was because of his pass blocking. Kenny Gainwell is touted as a good pass blocker, but if this kid is going to come in and run better, catch better than Gainwell, then he can come in and pass block for him as well. So I do like that. Gainwell surprisingly has been here for a little while now, so he is coming up on what would have to be a contract extension, and I don't think by this pick it seems like the Eagles don't want to give him that. I do like the running back room the Eagles have right now, with obviously Saquon and then adding Shipley in. I really hope my biggest concern on this pick, and just why I would give it, I would say a B, is just him coming off of a broken leg. He said that he's okay. He's going to be good to go. But, running back, broken leg, a little risky, but he does have a lot of that big playability, and, he should be a good player.
Yeah, running back and a broken leg certainly don't align. So Will Shipley, the Shipman. Maybe we could we can input that a little bit. I feel like that'd be fun. Pick 152, Ainias Smith. First day 4, second pick from the Eagles. He was wide receiver from Texas A&M. Ainias, some interesting names. Jalix Ainias.
Yeah, Quinion.
Yeah. Thoughts on?
Yeah, I like this pick a lot. I saw a tweet from, obviously went to Texas A&M. It was from Texas A&M's Barstool. And they just put out his highlight tape before day 3. And they said, Ainias Smith's still on the board. Someone's going to get a stud. And if you just look at this kid's highlights, his highlights are very, very impressive. 5'9", so he's on the smaller side. I think he'd be, obviously better in the slot. But him as a returner and him with the ball in his hands is absolutely electric. He had a bunch of returns in college, deep returns, touchdown returns. He only had 2 drops last season, I believe I saw that, or 2 drops in his last 70 targets or something like that. So that's obviously really impressive and something that we'll be able to utilize as good hands, especially with a speed guy, as we saw with Quez last year. Quez was a speed guy, terrible hands. So if you have a speed guy who can, Quez was able to get open sometimes, but he couldn't bring the ball in all the time. So to be able to have a speed guy with good hands, that's obviously a plus. And I do think with Cooper DeJean and now Ainias Smith, they are adding a little bit of stuff into their special teams. Britton Covey was a great punt returner last year. Maybe this kid's going to be the kick returner, but I would grade this pick a B+. The only reason I would say a B+ is just because he is small. So it's going to be interesting to see how he kind of matches up against some more physical guys in the NFL. But I do think that he has a lot of big playability. He's definitely going to challenge some of these guys, Paris Campbell and Devontae Parker, for that wide receiver 3 kind of position. And I do think that he's going to be a good slot receiver, but he's a little on the small side.
Yeah, 5'9". We're like the same. I'm like the same height as him. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Now then, pick 155 was one that some people wanted in the first round just because of his name, but they got Axeman Jr. They traded picks 164 and 201 up for 155 to get Jeremiah Trotter Jr., linebacker out of Clemson. Obviously, he is Jeremiah Trotter's son. It's full circle. It was meant to be, the destiny, all the things that the Eagles were throwing out there. Trotter, it's awesome. It's a good story, but he does have his downsides, and he is a day 4 pick. Some people were saying. What are your thoughts on it? What would you grade it?
Yeah, so I love this pick. I was obviously a little bit higher on Jeremiah Trotter Jr. than it seems like some of the NFL people are. I thought that people calling for him as, a second round pick was definitely a little bit overblown. And I think I was just thinking a lot back to the Nakobe Dean pick in the Nakobe Dean draft, where a lot of people thought Nakobe Dean was going to be a first round pick. Some people thought a second round pick. Then he fell all the way to the end of the third round. So I feel like with a lot of these linebackers, especially some of the guys, a lot of the linebackers, unless they're like a special player like Devin White was a few years ago coming out of LSU, they're going to fall in the draft just because the NFL doesn't put that much of a premium on the linebacker position. But like you said, it's obviously a great story getting Trot Jr. back here. Grew up in Philly, obviously, went to St. Joe's Prep, coming back, getting drafted by the same team as his dad. I mean, it's just awesome. But in terms of the player, I really like the player. I think that he's going to definitely challenge Nakobe Dean for one of those starting spots. I think that a lot of Eagles fans just kind of still give Nakobe the benefit of the doubt, where Nakobe hasn't really shown too much and has been hurt a lot. I don't think that he will end up being the starter. I think that he will start off as a backup. But if Nakobe does get hurt or isn't playing well, I think that he'll be able to come in. He was good in coverage last year. He was a massive playmaker, and he hits hard. I think one of the biggest things that I like about some of the defenders that the Eagles have gotten, I talked about it with Cooper DeJean, but they are getting really, really good tacklers. Last year, I know I said it before, but I'll say it again, they were not a good tackling team. So I like that at the very least they're getting kids in here that can tackle. Now, if you watch some of the plays where he hits these guys and the ball just flies out just on how hard he's hitting them. Some of the biggest games of the season last year for Clemson, he really showed out, played really well. Some of the concerns are that he's not as big as his dad was, so he might not be able to shed blocks as easy, so he might get swallowed up a little bit. But I think just in the 5th round, you need to take risks on guys, need to take chances on guys, and this is the kind of guy that you need to take a chance on. Everyone, all the scouts say that he knows the game so well, obviously from his dad teaching him for the whole year through all his young years. So his instincts are going to be great. So I think that that's going to be a big plus. And I think that he can play a little bit, and it's going to be interesting to see, what he develops into. Obviously, a first-round pick, so we can't expect too much from him. And we need to. I think one of the biggest things for Eagles fans is that we just need to separate his name from the player. He's not his dad. And we can't expect him to be his dad, especially right away, but we need to let him be his own person and his own player. But I think that he does have a lot of upside. Definitely give this pick an A just from the feel good standpoint. And I do really, really like the player.
And he's going to rock number 54 as well. So it's really full circle. It's going to be awesome. Trot Jr. Little axe. He does the axe, right?
Yeah, he does.
All right, that's awesome.
Cool.
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
Pick 172 was Trevor Keegan, an offensive guard from Michigan. There's a video going around of him and the parade with Michigan with his shirt off, chugging beer. So a little bit of Jason Kelce in the kid, but Trevor Keegan. How do you feel about it? What grade would you give?
Yeah, and then he wore his Deshaun Jackson jersey that he had from when he was a kid to his interview with Eagles media. So I thought that was funny. I don't think he's an Eagles fan, but it must have just been a D-Jack fan. Kind of crazy that the Eagles draft picks now were fans of the Eagles players we grew up, at least I grew up with, because they're all around like my age now, but that they were all wearing a Deshaun Jackson jersey in middle school and now being on the Eagles just makes you think like, wow, we're really really going deep. We're really getting old here. But I like the pick. Obviously, anytime you can get an offensive lineman later in the draft for the Eagles, I love it, just because they've had so much success with it. everyone's going to come back, and especially with the guy that we're going to talk about in a little bit, Dylan McMahon, as with the Jason Kelsey, comparison. But even these guys that aren't going to be starters for the Eagles have had really good depth at offensive line. They're not guys who you want starting, but in a spot they can come in, they can do a job, they can be okay. And I think that's what Trevor Keegan, he definitely has starter potential. One of the things that he did last year was he didn't allow a sack and 382 pass blocking snaps, which is very impressive, especially going up against the type of pass rushers that Michigan played against last year. So I do like the talent there, but being these later round picks, we can't expect Jeff Stoutland to kind of turn them all into these, future starting guys. But at the same time, the Eagles do need depth of the offensive line. I think one of the most underrated talking points so far this offseason has been how Jack Driscoll has left. Sua Opeta, I believe, might still be there, but they just don't have a lot of depth on the offensive line. So getting a few of these offensive linemen late in the draft, some talented guys, seeing what Jeff Stoutland can do with them. I think obviously it is a little bit of Tyler Steen insurance just in case Tyler Steen can't play, which I think he can. But it's good to just get these guys, let them get with Stoutland, and just kind of see what he can do.
Yeah, I always can trust Stoutland with anything he does. Keegan, what grade would you give him?
I'll give it a B. I do like the pick. I think that going with an offensive guard there is a good spot. And yeah, I like it. It doesn't, overwhelm me and wow me, but I do like it. And I do think that Stoutland, if he gets his hands on him, can at least make him a good backup for the team, for the, controllable backup for the next 4 years.
Pick number 185. We saw a little wide receiver early in the draft. Now the Eagles are taking a ginormous wide receiver in Johnny Wilson from Florida State. Very large human and very good at football too.
Yeah, 6'6", 230. Obviously, that's a very big wide receiver. He's got great size, so the Eagles will be able to use him in some red zone situations. The one thing I don't like about this pick and why I would give it a C is that a lot of teams projected him to be a tight end in the NFL, but the Eagles are keeping him at wide receiver. So that kind of makes me nervous because obviously if he's going to a lot of teams project him to be a tight end, and that means he doesn't have great speed and great separation on the outside. So he relies a lot on his size and strength, which can be a good thing. But at the same time, if a guy's being bounced between tight end and wide receiver, that's not exactly what I'm looking for in an outside wide receiver. But on a guy that's 6'6", 230, played at a big program, late in the draft, why not take a chance on him, see what you got, see if you can develop him a little bit.
Yeah, and the final pick at 190, no relation to Vince, Dylan McMahon, a guard who's a center from NC State. McMahon, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so
on the final pick?
I actually like this pick a lot. He again, I'll say a lot of things I said about Keegan, getting Jeff Stoutland, an offensive lineman, to kind of just go in there and be able to get his hands on him and see if he can mold him over the years to eventually becoming a good backup. Or, some of these guys could turn into starters the way Stoutland's been going with them. It's pretty crazy. Sayamalu, Kelsey, Mailata, these guys were all starters for Eagles, and they were not drafted early on. The thing I like about McMahon is that he can play multiple positions, and why I would rate this pick as a B+ for the Eagles is because that he has the ability to kind of swing around the line as a backup role. In the future, he can play guard, he can play center, which I like that a lot, especially if you're going to be a backup. I mean, the Eagles need versatile backups in the offensive line. And if you can move around, you can play center, you have that history, you can move over to one of the offensive guard spots in a pinch. That's extremely valuable. He's a little bit undersized, which a lot of people are going to say, oh, undersized, offensive lineman from the 6th round. That's great. Offensive, undersized center. We just got the next Kelsey. But, it's a good depth piece. And he as well only allowed, Keegan didn't allow any sacks, but last year, McMahon, 2013, 361 pass snaps, 12 pressures and 1 sack, so still pretty good. Played at NC State, so now not the top competition, but still a pretty good program. yeah, I like it. Might as well take a chance on a guy in the late rounds and see what Stoutland can do with him.
It's worked out in the past, so hopefully we get some good history. So that's it for the Eagles draft. Obviously they added a lot of picks for next year. 2025 third, 4th, 5th. They're stacked up for the third day in 2025. And they did that all on Saturday. It was like the record for amount of it was like 7 trades. It was crazy.
Yeah.
What is Howie planning something, or are they just stacking up for the future?
So I think first and foremost, the Eagles did not have a lot of picks in next year's draft. I believe they only had 5 or 6 maybe, which obviously there's 7 rounds, so you want to at least have 1 per round. So being able to get some extra picks in there is always good. I feel like this is said every single year, but next year is projected to be a better draft than this year. You never really know how it's going to play out. A lot of these guys that get drafted high, they weren't on people's radars last year. So, I feel like people just always say that. But I don't know if Howie's planning something. You never know with Howie. It's always good to have ammunition going into the season of draft picks, especially stuff like 3rd, 4th, 5th, because we have seen players get moved for that, especially around the end of training camp. I mean, CJ GJ, even L'Jarius Sneed was just traded for a 3rd, I believe, because he had to get a contract extended. It's always good to have those picks there where if you need a starter, you can go and kind of get one with the extra 3rd round pick. But at the same time, I do think that the Eagles were just trying to make sure that they have enough picks in next year's draft. And then if they do need to add something between now and week 1, that they have a little bit of ammunition to be able to go and get someone.
Yes, they do. Grade the entire Eagles draft. I'll run it through again. Quinyon Mitchell at 22, Cooper DeJean at 40, 94, Jalix Hunt, Will Shipley at 127, Anais Smith 152, Trot Jr. at 155, Trevor Keegan 172, Johnny Wilson at 185, Dylan McMahon at 190, as well as trading for a crap ton of picks next year. Give them a grade. Be a teacher for us.
So I'd have to go an A on this Eagles draft. And then the big reason is because of the early rounds. Being able to address in my opinion, one of the biggest positions of need now and going forward with 2 picks that, while they weren't exactly my first choice, it's hard to deny that they are great prospects and they have a lot of potential going forward. And then being able to add guys in the later rounds that I do think that with some coaching up, they can be able to come in and play, like Jeremiah Trotter Jr., Trevor Keegan. I do like these guys in the later draft, but it really comes down to the beginning of this draft and being able to get guys that being able to get 2 corners who, or if you want to call, Cooper DeJean a hybrid, being able to get 2 secondary players who were both had 1st round grades from a lot of people within the first 2 rounds is a massive, massive win for this team. Brings you back to 2002 with, Lito and Sheldon going 1st and 2nd round back then. But the Eagles needed young guys in the secondary. They got young guys in the secondary. Hopefully that they got the right young guys in the secondary, but it's, hopefully these guys can play. But I think it was a very, very successful draft for the Eagles.
Yeah, one of the best drafts ever. Some people are saying, we'll see.
Everyone, last year, everyone loves the draft. And while Jalen Carter turned out great, Nolan Smith is still a huge question mark. And, you can always have your day after the draft grades and then after year 1 grades. We'll see how it turns out. And I think it's too early to call it one of the best drafts ever for the Eagles, but it is definitely a very, very positive one for sure.
Yeah, very good draft. And right before the draft got underway, the Eagles even settled some rumors. A.J. Brown got a huge extension. 3-year extension worth $96 million, the highest for any wide receiver in NFL history. He's now under contract through the 2029 season, and his total guarantee of $84 million is also the highest. His trade rumors are shut down. They're gone. Although that was such a joke that was even happening, and now it's gone. Forget about it. Big win for the Birds.
Yeah, this is a great contract for the Eagles. I think the biggest thing, like you said, is kind of getting that speculation down of, does AJ want to be here? Are him and Jalen still okay? All that kind of stuff just gets shut down with one contract. It's also massive because they got it done before some of the other great wide receivers in the NFL. They got it done before Justin Jefferson. They got it done before Jamar Chase. So getting him locked in now and getting it done early, we will be able to save them money. But it also, we all love AJ, but we all know that he can be a little emotional. So, you don't know going into what could potentially be a contract year if Devontae Smith's getting a lot of targets, if Saquon Barkley's getting a lot of targets. I'm not saying that he would complain, but that's always a worry with any wide receiver or any skill position player going into what could be a contract year. So just being able to just kind of shut all that out. Saquon's paid, Devontae's paid, AJ Brown's paid. They're all paid as top players at their position. It will make them all happy going in, and I think it'll make it a little bit easier to spread the ball around. It's a great contract for the Eagles. Having him and Devontae locked in for the near future is awesome. The best wide receiver duo the Eagles have ever had. They're going to continue to be one of the top 2 wide receiver duos in the NFL. If T. Higgins gets traded, they might just be the best in the whole NFL. So I think it's a great deal for the Eagles and super exciting that AJ is going to be here for a long time.
Yeah, it's good. And something else that is a great duo is you and your seat at a game. And how do you buy a seat and a ticket to go to a game, Sam?
SeatGeek.
SeatGeek. Thank you to SeatGeek for sponsoring this podcast and the Philly Sports Reports. SeatGeek is the easiest and most efficient way to buy your tickets. Each seat is given a green, red, or yellow dot, indicating whether purchasing that ticket would be a good, bad, or fair deal. By using code Philly Sports Report, you can save $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. Again, Philly Sports Report, PHILLYSPORTS REPORT. You'll save $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. Phil's season, get your tickets for the Phils. They're playing really good. Sixers playoffs and Union and concerts, comedian, whatever. Anything and everything is on SeatGeek. Again, Philly Sports Report. First SeatGeek order, $20 off. Click the link in the description or the bio to save. Thank you to SeatGeek for sponsoring. Sam, we've got a lot of time left in the hour, so we still need to talk a lot about the Sixers. It was a big weekend for the Eagles, but Sixers arguably bigger. And I want to start with maybe the biggest man in Philadelphia, Joel Embiid. With Bell's palsy and a non-functioning leg, he drops 50 in Game 3. Bell's palsy came out after Game 3. Has anyone even heard of it? He said it's affecting his vision at times, causing it to be blurry, and said he constantly has to put drops in his eye to keep it from getting too dirty. He also said it's unclear how long the condition could last, but that it could be weeks or months. However, he drops 50. The man is insane, Sam.
Yeah, he's a great player. I mean, all this time coming since we drafted him, we wanted him to produce in the playoffs. And while I do think that his playoff struggles have been massively overrated by Sixers fans, it is hard not to say that he has failed so far in the playoffs. But, one thing that you cannot question about Joel Embiid is his toughness. I mean, he just gets all these crazy injuries that, I've never even heard of before. And he tears ligaments that no one's ever heard of before. And his teammates hit him in the face and breaks his face, and he keeps going. And, he just plays through so much. His body takes on so much. And then to just come out and have that kind of performance, I think he has played really, really well so far this whole series. But then to come out and have a 50 ball, I think the biggest thing for him was that jumper was really going last game. In the first 2 games, you kind of saw that it was tailing off. It was coming up short in the end. And I think that he was worried about his knee. He was getting a little fatigued down the end. And that's why that jumper was coming up short. But his jumper, the 3-pointer, was on absolute fire last game. And he was keeping it maintained throughout the third and fourth quarters, which means that his conditioning is getting a little better. His knee's feeling a little better. He's trusting it a little more. And, to be able to shoot with a blurry eye and, half of your face being temporarily paralyzed. And it's just amazing stuff what he's doing right now. And I really hope that they win today and are able to come back and win this series and keep going, because I feel like if we get past the Knicks, we can have a special playoff run. And and really just kind of see the potential that we've wanted to see out of Embiid in the playoffs.
Yeah, it would be
I
awesome.
mean, he's averaging 38 points a game so far this series with one knee and one eye. It's insane.
That's unhuman, and there's a lot of debate on, especially radio and around, of losing faith in Joel. And did you ever lose faith? I think I lost faith in him last postseason, but kind of regained it a little bit throughout this season. Did you ever really lose faith in Joel? And if you did this restore it?
No, I've never lost faith in Joel, just because I feel like I personally have always blamed the supporting cast and especially the general managers of the past and the current for not putting a good enough team around Joel Embiid. I have accepted, and I accepted a few years ago, that Joel Embiid is a great player, but he is going to tail off a little bit in the playoffs, just like every star. It's not just Embiid where his points go down per game in the playoffs. I think that Embiid has put up really good games in the playoffs. If you look last year against the Celtics, everyone forgets about Game 5 where he put up 38 points or whatever it was against the Celtics. He's had really good games in the past, but the supporting cast has never been good enough, and I don't think this supporting cast is good enough or even close to good enough. So I personally have always just blamed the guys who are in charge of putting the team around Joel Embiid, and then also the supporting cast that he has had, because no star has ever won a championship all by themselves. We've seen guys get close. I mean, Allen Iverson almost did it in 2001, but majority of the time they have star players. You look back at the Nuggets last year, obviously Nikola Jokic was awesome in the playoffs, but so was Jamal Murray, so was other guys on that team. So you really need a whole team around a player, and it's not just on one person. And I think that he's been underrated as a playoff performer a little bit. There's always going to be those stinkers, and you can't run away from that. But no, I've never lost faith in Embiid.
I lost faith in him, I think, last year after games 6 and 7. I saw him laughing on the court after game 7, and I was like, all right, I can't with Joel. And I mean, I think earlier this season when he was on that crazy streak, I was like, all right, I can buy into this. And now, especially, I'm back in. Give Joel all the money you want. But you mentioned the supporting cast. It's obviously holding the Sixers back. Who needs to step up? If the Sixers want to win this series and go deep, who on the supporting cast needs to really come through?
Well, everyone wants me, and the first person that they're going to think of is Tobias Harris, but I am so far past the point of thinking that Tobias Harris is going to do anything that I'm going to have to say Kelly Oubre. It's a shame that it's come down to this, because Kelly Oubre is a veteran minimum contract player who is he's literally on the veteran minimum contract, and we are expecting him to take over that third scorer role on this team. But if we are going to go where we want to go this playoffs or even this series, it has to be Kelly Oubre, but it has to be on the road. We know that these guys are always going to play better at home. Role players always play better at home, but these guys need to step up on the road, and we just need one other guy to step up, whether that's Batum, whether that's last game it was Campaign, against the Heat it was Batum. In game 1 it was Lowry, even though we lost. One of these other, maybe D'Anthony Melton coming back, he'll be able to give them a spark. One of these other guys who are they're just guys, to be honest, but they need to have that big of a game to kind of propel them past, which is just a shame of where this team and this roster has come to, that Embiid and Maxey can be averaging, Embiid's averaging 38, Maxey, I'm sure, I haven't seen the number, but I'm sure it's having to be averaging close to 30 points a game, and we're relying on, Campaign to go off, or Nico Batum to go off, or Kyle Lowry, 38 years old, to go off. Just the fact that we're at this point and this is the roster that we're dealing with when we have 2 star players playing so well in the postseason is just so disappointing.
Yeah, it is, and really makes you point a finger at who's running the show. And we've seen it the last couple of years, as people don't want to admit it. I think the eyes are finally open that those running the show are, well, they don't want to win, as Pat Bev said on his podcast.
Well, people love and have this blind faith in Daryl Morey for some reason, when he has never shown that he can put together a championship team. He's been in the NBA since the early 2000s, I believe. He's never once made the NBA Finals. He's never once won a conference finals. Obviously, he's never made the NBA Finals. He's shown consistently over his career that he cannot build a winning roster. Yet, for whatever reason, Sixers fans, NBA people, they all just blindly believe that he's just going to magically, with his crunching his numbers and his percentages, that he's just going to build this NBA championship roster when he's had great players. He's had Joel Embiid. He's had James Harden in his prime. He's never done it. He's living off of his trade of James Harden from years and years ago. He never put a championship team around James Harden. He's never put a championship team around Joel Embiid. He's run 2 stars, whether or not we wanted them here or not, but they were good players at the time out of this town with Ben Simmons and James Harden. He's projected to give Paul George, who had 7 points in the last playoff game, a max deal this offseason. That's the newest, thing that people think that we're going to do this offseason. And I haven't fallen for the Daryl Morey thing. I don't think that he's done a good job here, and I think we've continuously seen it over his career and his job with the Sixers. I mean, name a good young player the Sixers have that he got. I mean, he didn't draft Maxey. He hasn't brought any young talent here. The guys that he has here are old and horrible. The trades he made, Buddy Hield is horrendous. That was the only move we made in this offseason. Like, he just hasn't done a good job in this roster. It's a shame that where we're at, because it's going to take a lot to get them over the hump.
It sure is. Let's backtrack back to Embiid. That has kind of started some hatred, I would say. Embiid kind of messed up a little bit in Game 3. He probably should not have dropped 50. Should Embiid have been ejected after whatever he did, or is it just an overreaction by Knicks fans and the world needs to keep moving?
So I don't think he should have been ejected, because I do believe in that there should be a different standard for ejections in the regular season versus the playoffs. I do think that if it was the regular season, there would be a real question and a real, honestly, I would have been okay if they ejected him in the regular season. But in the playoffs, I like that they didn't eject him. It wasn't something that I think needed to be an ejection in a playoffs. Like I said, I do believe in a different standard for that, but it was 100% dirty. It was a bad play by Joel Embiid. A lot of Sixers fans are going to go and say, well, Dante DiVincenzo did it to Kelly Oubre. Okay, well, that doesn't mean that Embiid should do it back to Mitchell Robinson. I do understand Embiid's logic on why he did it, because he's had so many people fall on him and injure him. But, I mean, it's a bad look for Embiid for sure.
It certainly is, and it started a little bit of a thing with Knicks fans, as you see the that one account, the F Philly shirt with Embiid who can't blink, and it's crazy. Even Tim Thibodeau, or whatever his name is, the Knicks head coach, is crying as well about the foul calls with Embiid. Just kind of recap everything that's happened with the Knicks fans, and how much of a baby is the city of New York sports fans?
Well, the Knicks fans putting Embiid with half of his face paralyzed on a T-shirt and selling it is pretty disgusting. I mean, he is dealing with a medical condition right now where half of his face, he can't blink one of his eyes. You would think that people would have more sympathy for somebody who's going through that, but apparently not. I do think it's super hypocritical of Knicks fans to complain about foul calls because they won game 2, because they did not get foul calls. And then they have one of the biggest foul baiters in the entire NBA with Jalen Brunson. He will drive, stick his butt out, and just, put up a shot to get fouls. And, if they want Embiid's whistle to stop, then they should also want Jalen Brunson's whistle to stop. And then he will be just about completely ineffective in this series, because all he has been doing is getting to the line. And Knicks fans, it's funny. They're at the stage where they, are new to the playoffs. They think that because they're the New York Knicks that, they overreact to everything, but it's okay, because, hopefully we'll be able to humble them a little bit and win this series. But, they're at the stage that we were about 6 years ago when we were finally making the playoffs after a long drought, and we were excited. And, maybe they'll get to this point of Sixers fans where it's all sad. But I will say the one thing about the Knicks fans coming to the Sixers stadium is, for a Philly sports team that city that takes so much pride in our crowds. It was very embarrassing to see that a lot of Knicks fans were, kind of taking over our stadium a little bit there. Hopefully today will be a different story from that standpoint. But yeah, a lot of nasty and just disgusting things have been said about Embiid with his injuries and his his facial issues that he's going on right now. And you can always there's always going to be banter and stuff like that between fan bases, but to make fun of a guy who has half of his face partially paralyzed right now, that's taking it way, way, way too far.
It's taking it way beyond basketball. And you mentioned the Knicks fans taking over. We were looking at tickets for today's game, as you know, because this is kind of a last-minute put-together podcast. But the ticket prices are unaffordable. And if real Sixers fans at this point aren't the ones going to the games, it's those that can afford it. And a lot of people that live in Manhattan can afford to buy those tickets and come up. And it's probably cheaper than getting a ticket at the Garden, honestly.
Yeah, well, that's what's crazy too. Is cheaper than going to Madison Square Garden. I mean, I've been to the Garden twice. I went during the COVID year to see the Sixers, and that was the only reason that I went was because it was the COVID year. Because that was the only year that was actually affordable for my friends and I to take the train up and go. Because we have wanted to go every year, but the tickets at the Garden are just ridiculous. So, I've done it. I've gone to cheaper stadiums to watch the Phillies and the Sixers and stuff like that. So, good on the Knicks fans for doing it. But it's just a shame because the Sixers season tickets are so expensive, and then these season ticket holders see an advantage to take to kind of get some of their money back, and they're going out trying to make some money back on their tickets, and they're getting in some of the wrong hands. But yeah, it's insane how expensive tickets have gotten, especially to playoff games. I mean, it's wild.
And you see it with New York, especially at every team. I mean, Phillies, they are literally right behind the Mets dugout, packed in. We've sat there with Mets fans before. It was not pretty, but they just take over. And can it be stopped? I don't know, because I don't know what goes on. I don't know how they jump on it so quickly. Like when the Rangers come for the Flyers, it's literally all blue. And it has been that way for the last couple of years. The Flyers haven't been that good. Eagles, you see a lot of Giants fans. Not really, because it's Eagles are a little different, but it's crazy.
Yeah, I think a lot of it too is a little bit of Sixers fatigue. The Sixers have failed tremendously year after year after year in the playoffs, and then going down 0-2 in the first round to the Knicks, a team that a lot of people in Philadelphia thought that the Sixers were better than and should win this series, to just kind of have this, oh, here we go again feeling, where a lot of the Sixers season ticket holders who had to buy their playoff tickets, they said, I'm not wasting my money on going to a Sixers game where they're probably going to lose. And I've seen this movie before, kind of thing, where I'm not going to spend all this money to go back to watch the same movie over and over again, where it just pains me, So it's hard to blame them, but at the same time, I mean, if I had season tickets, I would go to every game. But I think a lot of it is the Sixers fatigue, a little bit of just, why am I especially after going down 0-2, why am I going to go pay all this money? You got to park, you got to get your beers, you got to get your hot dogs, all that kind of stuff. It's expensive to go to a game, especially, if you have season tickets and how much those playoff tickets are. So, they don't want to keep spending that money if they think that they're just going to lose. Like you wouldn't see this with the Phillies, because people expect the Phillies to win and such a great atmosphere. But that's how it was in the beginning of the Sixers playoffs. But after so many failed years, it's just kind of like, oh, we're really here again. Like,
and it's also at this point, it's just who can afford it as well, which is also has become a problem. You see with the Phillies too, when they got to the World Series, those crowds were nowhere near as good as they were from the NLDS and the CS, and it's just a major drop off. We've hit the hour mark, and we need to get to a little Game 4 preview that's coming up at 1:00 today. Can the Sixers tie the series at 2? What will it take? Will they do it? Are you positive? Maybe that little polo shirt you got going on is going to bring us some luck, maybe.
Yeah, so I am positive. I think that they will win this game. I think that last game was so encouraging from Embiid. And the biggest thing that I saw, I talked about it earlier, but his jumper maintaining to be good and making his shots, especially deep shots. Like when you have a bad knee, you have bad vision. Like your knees are tired, your shots are coming up short. We saw that in games 1 and 2. But for him to be able to continuously make those deep jump shots going into the third, going into the fourth quarter, I thought it was absolutely massive. And I do think that he may be turning the corner a little bit on that knee, getting a little bit more in shape. So I think that was just such a strong sign. I think, obviously he's not going to drop 50 again, but I do think that we can expect another game in the 30s. Hopefully Maxey can play a little better this game. He had a good game last game, but not, as great as he did in game 2. Like you said, like we talked about, it's just going to come down to which of these guys off the bench are really going to step up here and just kind of make that difference. Hopefully it's one of these role players, but I think we have a win here for the Sixers. I think we go back to New York 2-2, and then we got a best of 3. But they better win, because if they lose tonight, I think the series is over in 5. So
it's gonna be hard to win at the Garden.
Huge,
Mitchell Robinson,
such a massive swing game.
Yeah, Mitchell Robinson is warming up with the intention on playing in game 4. He's gonna warm up in the Knicks. We'll see where he is. So we'll see how that goes. That's still kind of floating around. So we'll see how he is. That'll probably be close to a game time decision. But I think in this game, the Knicks are going to come out very aggressive, going at Embiid, maybe trying even to hurt him because, that's Tim Thibodeau. I think if Embiid can cool and be chill when they're going at him and don't go back at them and avoid any major anything, I think if he can stay in this game, the Sixers are going to win. I think that's what it's going to come down to. If he can stay cool, not get himself in any trouble or any injury, because the Knicks are losers, I think the Sixers win this game.
I think that's a good point you make, because if he can keep his head, I think one of the big things that was so encouraging from the last game is that in years past, we've seen when teams kind of go at Embiid's head, get in his head. Nick Nurse talked about this in his book about when after they won the championship, he wrote a book and he talked about how great of a player Joel Embiid is. But if you can get in his head, you can take him out early and then it's over. And I think that was the biggest thing from the last game, is that the Knicks tried to get in his head. They, went up to him. It was physical game. They were, pushing and all that stuff. And in the past, Joel Embiid gets over aggressive. He's trying to dunk on people, trying to block shots, ends up fouling, has to get cooled down. But in that last game, he kept his head. He went out and he put his money where his mouth is with his play. So if he can continue to do that, then I do think you're right. I do think that he could have another big game. And, it showed at least last game a little bit of more maturity and growing up from Embiid that we've definitely been wanting to see.
That's for sure. And something else that's for sure is getting great gear on Foco. Foco, thank you for sponsoring. Real fans need the best gear. And that's why Foco makes legendary gear for the most legendary fans. Click on the link in the description or the bio to save 10% off any order at Foco. I actually just got an order from Foco the other day. John Kruk in the overalls bobblehead.
Nice.
And it's the greatest thing I've ever seen. It's beautiful. So make sure you go get some good stuff from Foco. That's all I have in this show.
Real quick, I wanted to add this because it is the Philly Sports Hour. How about Ranger Suarez? Holy moly, that dude is a freaking stud. A lot of people talked about coming out of camp how he's never had really a full training camp, full spring training camp. I'm in Eagles mode. Full spring training because he's had problems getting over the United States, had the World Baseball Classic last year. And he looks different this year because he had a full spring training. And, a lot of times when people say stuff about spring training, you don't know, you take it with a grain of salt, but man, he has been fantastic. Obviously everyone's comparing him to Cliff Lee. He looks a lot like Cliff Lee with the fielding. He has just been amazing. And Alec Boehm too. We've been waiting for Alec Boehm to kind of get that power stroke going a little bit. He's had a bunch of home runs recently, just driving in those runs. I want him to be the 4-hitter. The Phillies are playing really good baseball right now, 8 games above 500 in April. They talked about they were going to have a hot start coming out of camp and looked a little, I don't know, coming, right out of camp, but they've really picked it up and they're playing some very, very good baseball right now. It should be a really exciting,
Ranger Suarez, 32 and a 2/3 scoreless innings which tied Larry Anderson for third most in Phillies history. He was behind, I think, Cliff Lee and like Grover Cleveland Alexander. So, I mean, that's some pretty good company up there. But yeah, Rangers been incredible, and Alec Bohm has, I think it was like 19 RBIs in the last 15 games, which is absurd.
The whole staff has just been great.
Yeah. And you'll see Taijuan Walker going out there today, so that'll be interesting. We'll see how that goes. But we got to end this show. Sixers later today, 1 o'clock. If you ever miss the Philly Sports Hour live, you can go back and watch it on YouTube or listen on any podcast app. Sam, thank you for joining. Where can people find you?
Yes, you can follow me on Twitter. My handle is right there, Hein_Sam. And then you can check me out for my post-game Sixers recap today, hopefully for a win.
Yeah, hopefully. Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. Make sure to follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Threads. Rate us on the podcast. I think that's what you say, like, rate us? I don't really... Is that, like, the thing?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure how it works.
Yeah, rate us. Do whatever you want on the podcast, whatever. Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. Hopefully the Sixers won today, and next time we'll see you next week. We'll maybe be talking about a series win. Maybe. Thank you, everybody. See you.
Swing and a drive, left field. It's deep. It's gone. Yes! And it is gone. Yes! It is bedlam at the bank. Look at the doctor. Yes, he's got it. Here he comes. Way back to me. It is Cleveland slammed up. And the doctor made a sensational play. In front, the bucket, they score! And Giroux got it.